If the Lord's Chamber is the ultimate stage, then Baroness Wilcox of Newport is a top performer. With a prestigious teaching and local government background, Lady Wilcox shares her journey from Wales to Westminster in this new episode of Her Voice in the House.
My title is the Baroness Wilcox of Newport, Debbie Wilcox, and I am a member of the Labour group in the House of Lords.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us today, Debbie, on Her Voice in the House. We'd love to kick off by you sharing your background, and if there is one, a defining moment that led you to where you are today.
I've probably got several defining moments, but my background is steeped in public service. So I was a teacher for 35 years, which means I'm quite unusual in terms of politicians because I did a real job for a very long time. But I managed to combine that. So in 2004, while still teaching, I was at Hawthorne High School in Pontypridd at the time. I stood for election to Newport City Council, and I remained in post in teaching and as a councillor for the next 10 years, combining both areas. As I got more and more interested in politics and moved up the hierarchy somewhat, I got my cabinet post in 2014, cabinet member for education, and that was the time where I parted ways and left full-time teaching, although I did go back 18 months later to help out for a term doing some supply teaching, and I think that really underlined my 35-year career, that I'd had enough by then. So I just saw politics as a continuation of public service, and a couple of years after leaving teaching, I was very fortunate to be elected as the first woman leader of Newport City Council, which was a tremendously exciting role and obviously one that, took up a great deal of time. We were in the midst and throes of austerity and trying to make a balanced budget, which is a legal requirement in a council when you had so many budget cuts, was really very, very difficult to do. But it brought its challenges. And then a year later, I became elected as the first woman leader of the Welsh Local Government Association. Again, a really important task, and one where I led the remaining 21 other leaders of Welsh councils, usually in discussion with the Welsh Government about giving us more money for local government. But there were other aspects to it as well. So pivotal moments and changes, it was really several things. It was remaining on that track of public service, but moving into other areas where I felt I could do even better using the skills and experience that I had.
And so what inspired you to pursue your career then in education? Was there one sort of singular person, or was it you always had an interest in those fields and wanted to make a difference?
Well, in terms of education, you see, I was very lucky. I had a place at the Central School of Speech and Drama. I was there with a couple of people called Dawn French and Jennifer Saunders. I don't know what happened to them, but
Never heard of them before.
but I'm a baroness, so there we are. No, I started out in that world really wanting to be famous. I know it sounds trite, but when you're 18 or 19, that's usually something on your horizon. So I thought that I would be in the performing arts somewhat, and because I'm a Valleys girl, I come from a very working class family, work was a premium objective in our household. I did a teaching course because you always have to have something to fall back on. Therefore, it kind of, it kind of melded together. So I got into teaching as a way of enjoying continuing to do performing arts. But I tell you what, I got really good at it and I really loved it. And it was such a challenge. I started teaching in Brixton in the early 1980s, and boy, was that a challenge. The pull of home, you're Welsh, Laura, you know what it's like.
Yeah.
That hiraeth, you want to go back home.
Yeah.
So a couple of years in London teaching, and then I got a job back in South Wales, in Nantaglo. And that thought of fame and fortune, although I did have a writing contract with Rack Records and Mickey Most, but that's another story for another day. So we were still keeping going on the entertainment side and being famous, but more and more teaching drew me in and education drew me in, and the differences that a good teacher can make was so important to me. And the political thing then, all those years later, I just saw it as a continuation of public service, but I really, really enjoyed politics. And becoming a member of a local council was a fantastic introduction to what politics is all about.
Politics is basically another form of drama, isn't it? I mean, the chamber is your stage.
Well, I, I try not to think of it in those terms, but I do enjoy the performance of it.
Yeah, we can certainly see that when we watch you back on Parliament TV. So perhaps you could share with us any sort of significant challenges or setbacks that you face, I guess, getting to this point and how you've overcome them, if you're comfortable doing so.
Yeah, setbacks, I guess, there were very few um, opportunities for promotion back in South Wales, working through the 80s and 90s. They were difficult times, closure of industry, the miners' strike. It really was a very regressive time, and there were very, very few chances. I think that if I'd stayed in London, that I would have got promotion much more quickly, and probably even and up to and including headship. But those opportunities were not there. So what I did was I just hunkered down and tried to be the best teacher that I could be. Um, and I've that's a kind of bit of it's a it's a bit of a flashpoint really for everything that I've done in my life. If one area doesn't succeed, I've always had a plan B. Um, and sometimes plan B dominates. And so, whereas I wasn't able to progress as quickly or as to the levels I felt I should be in education, um, I looked at other avenues of work. And so I got into examining, for example, and I eventually became the principal A-level examiner for the whole of the UK for drama and theatre studies. So I'd always have like a second string to my bow or an alternative. It comes from the fact that I'm sadly a glass half full girl, and I just believe that there's always something better for us. And I just felt there was something better for me out there. I didn't think I'd end up in the House of Lords, but that was a far off uh, wish. But there you go.
Here we are.
Mm.
So how do you stay motivated during difficult times? Is there some sort of mantra you have, or just you, like you said, you're glass half full individual? Do you just stay true to those beliefs and on what you feel is right?
Yeah, I do. I do. I just keep going. It took me a long time after I left teaching to get out of that. It's almost like institutionalization. That you get up at a certain time, you work at a certain time. Um, I would always do, when I was doing full-time counsel, so I'd get my counsel work started on a Sunday afternoon for the week ahead, because that's what I'd always done as a teacher, plan my lessons for the week, make sure all the paperwork's up to date. So Sunday afternoons into evenings. And then I'd always try and make sure I'd finish by the time it was Antiques Roadshow. So there was that pattern. I didn't have to ask anyone's permission if I wanted to pop out to the shops. Um, because of course you can't in school, your feet are nailed to the floor. You're there from the time the bell starts to the time the bell ends. You can't have a long weekend. You can't go away on a Thursday night, have a Friday off. You can't do any of those things. So for 35 years, I'd lived in this very regimented way. And so the freedom that I had when I became a full-time counsellor and then council leader and then up here in Westminster, it was very strange for me because I don't have to ask anyone's permission. And, that took a lifetime of unlearning.
Yeah. So fast forwarding then to being in the Lords, could you share with us how you found out and I guess what your reaction was and the reaction of those close to you? 'Cause a bit of a shock. I think it's almost like when you receive a national honour, isn't it? You get an envelope in the mail and you think it's a tax notice or a summons for speeding. It's something very sort of plain and you don't know what it is and you can't talk about it. But share with us your experience of that moment when you found out.
Well, not talking about it was the hardest thing in the world for me because I am a natural talker and I'm a natural sharer. So that was the hardest bit. So it was, I'll give you a little bit of a backstory. So my partner Fabi and I enjoy the theatre and would come to London fairly often. It was a lovely August Saturday. We'd been to the National to a Saturday matinee, and we were driving back along the embankment and then crossing over Lambeth Bridge. And bearing in mind that I had tried a couple of times to get selected for Parliament and for the Senedd, and things hadn't quite worked out. So I looked over on the right-hand side, as I'm driving over Lambeth Bridge, and Fabi said to me, "Well, there you go. It's all over now, isn't it?" To which I said, "It ain't over till it's over." And she said, "What? Oh, gosh, come on, you've had it now. You're leader of the council. You're going to have to put Westminster away." I said, "No, it's not over till it's over." Literally 2 weeks later, I had a phone call from the then First Minister, Mark Drakeford. I thought he was ringing me up in my role as leader of the Welsh Local Government Association to ask me about something, or to ask me not to ask for money for something or whatever. And he's I can see it now, seated at my dining room table, and he said, I have an opportunity to submit an application for the House of Lords, Debbie, and I'd like you to be our candidate." I literally nearly fell off the chair. I could not believe it. I instantly said yes, because you don't get asked twice about these things. And yeah, and there we are. So that was mid-August. We were then going on holiday with our dear friends, my dear late friend Kath, who we miss every day, and Bethan. So I had to spend a week in Spain, absolutely bursting to tell them. And of course, I couldn't tell anyone in the council either. So that was mid-August, and then it was announced. I think it was something like September the 20th, because we had a council meeting on the Tuesday, which was the normal day for Newport. But at that point, I'd kept the secret for well over a month, and it was time to tell them. I think the rest of the council were quite shocked when it was announced. But there we are. And so that's the story, and that's how it happened.
So what do you enjoy most about sitting in the House of Lords?
I think, firstly, you're at the centre of everything when you're in Westminster. And I think that's been the biggest change I've seen because my political life was obviously South Wales and then Wales in general. So being in Westminster, you're at the heart of everything, and you really are playing a part in changing people's lives through good governance and good scrutiny of the laws of this country. And you're surrounded by experts and wonderful speakers and wonderful debaters. And it is a lesson every day. You learn something here. Um, what I'm very disappointed about is how little people know about what we do here. And I don't know how we develop that, because, there's a very good comms team here and people put things out. But people don't really understand what the Lords does. I take part in something called Learn with the Lords, where I do sessions with schools across the country, which I really enjoy, obviously, as that's my former profession. They always say in those sessions, "Oh, we didn't know you did this," or "We didn't know you did that," or "We didn't know how much you did." And I think that's an ongoing job for us. And even colleagues, because we had a lot of new colleagues last summer, colleagues that I'd known in local government from other areas of England, joined us as members of Parliament. And, I've met up with them, and they say, "Oh, Debbie, I didn't realise you did this in the Lords." And so if members of Parliament don't know what we do, I mean, what do the general public have? So it's really important that we use opportunities like this. And I'm really glad you're doing this series, Laura, because it's important people know who we are and what we do, because we are not just the second chamber, but we are the revising chamber, and we make things better.
Yeah, and that's what her voice in the house. We're really keen to spotlight the work that you're doing, bring that authenticity to it, but also you can share in your own words, the difference that you're making and what you're passionate about. And that really neatly leads us on to my next question about what are the issues that you're spotlighting to your platform here, and how do you feel that you've made a difference since you were ennobled?
I don't know if I've made any difference at all, but what I've tried to do is I've tried to focus on Wales and Welsh issues because they are large, they take such a minority part of what goes on here. Only last week I managed to get in on a question about culture, and I was able, in that question, to promote the investment summit in Newport, the money that Bad Wolf, the Cardiff media company, are putting into the economy and making employment opportunities and training opportunities so that social mobility in the arts and culture world is evident in what that company are trying to do. And an opposition peer stopped me afterwards and said, again, without prompting, Debbie, I'm always so impressed with how you bring the positive aspects of Wales into the chamber. And I said, well, that's what I want to do because Wales needs that bigger platform. And, you can hear about the negativity about the NHS and waiting lists and so on and so forth, forever and a day. But what people need to understand is a thriving culture and country that are doing things differently. And I see that as really important. As an adjunct to that, obviously, education and culture um, are really very important areas of my work as well. So when I was doing Shadow Front Bench, I was very much involved in various bills, particularly the schools bill and the education bill. And I hope that I made some difference with the amendments that we got through. I don't know as a backbencher how much influence one can have, but I, I'm, I'm with that glass half full. I like to think I make a difference, and I like to think that comments that I had last week that other people can see what I'm trying to do here.
And how do you work together as a Welsh caucus and actually across the isle as well to spotlight Wales and the issues?
I
There's common ground.
I don't think there's a working together, but I think we speak often from the same platform. So yeah, you will have other Welsh peers coming in on the topic, particularly if there's an actual question on Wales. We will all try and get in, but there's in 10 minutes there isn't an opportunity for us all to have a go. But we will be singing from the same hymn sheet, to use a real vernacular. Yeah.
Very Welsh voice.
Yes, absolutely.
So, as a female member of the House of Lords, do you feel that there's a particular pressure spotlight on you to perform, um, or have you not experienced that?
Well, obviously, the gender balance is such that there are far more men here than women. And particularly in the questions bit of the day, where you have to stand up and make your voice heard and shout out, my lords, my lords, my lords, you can actually get shouted down by.
You're always pretty successful.
Well, I'm pretty successful because I've got a loud mouth.
Well, I was gonna put it quite like that.
And a loud voice and a presence, so I use that to my advantage. I think there's much more of a recognition of equality here now. I don't know what it was like years ago, but certainly in the 6 years I've been here, I've found it pretty equal, to be fair.
That's good to hear. So, you obviously lead quite a busy life and you commute down to Westminster from Newport, and we all know that can be pretty chaotic and traumatic with the travel situation. How do you try and balance your work and your personal life?
That's probably a difficult question to answer. You'd probably have to ask Fabi, my partner, and she'd probably say that I don't balance it. For example, it was her birthday in November the 8th, and it was the ennoblement of the Archbishop of Wales. And so, yet again, for 3 hours on her birthday, I was out doing civic duties. But you don't get invited to the enthronement of an archbishop every day of the week. And the Right Reverend Cherry Van is absolutely delightful and a wonderful leader of our church. So she didn't mind. But it's things like that, it's missing family parties. or family events. Peter Kyle was down in Newport the other Sunday, and it was a family party for it was an 80th birthday party. And I was absolutely under no impression that I could not go and meet with Peter Kyle, the business secretary, who's a lovely chap and absolutely understood. But I had to go to the family birthday party. And it's those kinds, because I have sacrificed, and we have sacrificed things over the years for politics. And I'm sure, as every frontline politician has had to do, and getting that balance is right. But as I'm moving into my later years now, the beauty of the House of Lords is that it does give you that flexibility. I mean, I have to be here for 3-line whips. You know, everyone understands that. But I don't have to be here all the time. And I am trying to learn to prioritize a work-life balance. But, as people who know me well will tell you, oh, Debbie will never retire. Because what would I do? I don't know.
Who knows? Who knows? Is there a particular habit or routine that contributes to your, as I put your success, but I guess keeps you sane?
Not really. I love watching Coronation Street. Okay, that's my sanity blanket.
Here first.
Yeah, yeah. I taught media studies for years, so I love. I mean, I adore cinema. I adore theatre. I adore television, and I adore reading newspapers, which is a real dying art these days.
Mm. So, what advice would you give to your younger self looking back now?
Stop trying to please everybody, because you'll never do it. You'll never please everybody. And stop being enthralled to people. It was a very difficult time working through the 80s and 90s. It was a very hierarchical structure. You were at the bottom of the rung of the ladder in schools, and head teachers were all seeing and all powerful. And really, you were kept in your place. It was a bit Victorian, really, because things have changed so much now, and thank goodness they have. But you had to be subservient, and that didn't really fit with my personality and my character. But I had to do it. I've had to work for some really horrible, awful people. But what that did for me was make me into a far better leader when I had the chance to lead.
So, what does leadership mean to you? What does it look like to you?
It means people following you because they believe in what you say and what you do. It's not about, again, I use hierarchical or top down. It's about working together and bringing people with you. If you can't bring people with you, then you can forget it. I still try it out from time to time with London cab drivers. If by the time I get out of a cab from Westminster to Paddington, and if I've persuaded them to vote for me,
Yeah.
then I've done a good job, and I'm doing pretty well on my persuading London cab drivers. So I see that as leadership.
So, what message do you then hope to pass on to the next generation of women who are interested in public service? And whatever that might be, if they want to stand for Parliament, for local council, get involved in their community, or maybe one day they're driving across Lambeth Bridge and they see Victoria Tower and they think, over yet.
Yeah. I think be yourself, be genuine, be authentic, be kind, be involved, take part. Don't let others put you off. Your voice is as important as anyone else's. And if there isn't a seat for you at the table, bring your own chair.
Perfect. And finally, if you could describe the Lords in one word, what would that be?
Civilized.
I see. It is calmer down this end of the house, I will say. Well, Debbie, Lady Wilcox, thank you for joining us on Her Voice in the House. And we hope that you'll tune into the other episodes that we have coming down the line.
Diolch yn fawr, Laura. Thank you very much. It's been a lovely experience to try and tell people what I think, who I am, and where I'm from.
Thank you, Tia.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Her Voice in the House. Please like, subscribe, and share the podcast, and get in touch with your suggestions for a future episode.